The train hissed as it pulled into the small-town station, steel wheels grinding against the tracks with finality. Sergeant Daniel Rourke stepped off with a rucksack over one shoulder and a tired ache in his bones that 3 years of war had carved into him. He inhaled deeply. This wasn't the dust of Afghanistan. It was cedar trees, fresh soil, and distant honeysuckle. It was home, but something felt off. He had imagined this day 100 times. The welcome home signs, Anna running to meet him, auburn hair flying in the wind, her arms around him. The kiss they'd never had before he deployed, because she said she wanted to wait until he came home for real. They had written letters, hundreds maybe. Her cursive grew more confident with each passing month. But the letters had stopped about 5 months ago. The last one said she had the flu, that she'd write again soon, but she never did. Now here he was, no banners, no warm embrace, no Anna. Daniel walked the 2 miles into town, through streets he knew better than any map. The general store, the rusted swing set outside the elementary school, the quiet stretch of Main that led toward the chapel. He noticed familiar faces, Mrs. Daly from the bakery, old Ben Dorsey smoking his pipe on the porch of the barber shop. They looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and surprise. A few nodded. None approached. Finally he saw the steeple, and next to the chapel, the white picket fence he'd painted himself the summer before he left. The yellow farmhouse, Anna's house. His steps slowed. There were flowers blooming in the garden, marigolds and daisies, her favorites. Wind chimes tinkled in the breeze. A child's tricycle lay on the grass, and a man he didn't recognize was standing on the porch, cradling a toddler in his arms. Daniel froze. The man leaned down to kiss the woman who stepped out to join him. Anna, his Anna? Her hair was a little shorter, and she wore a simple sundress, barefoot like always. She laughed as she wiped something off the man's shirt. The child reached for her. Daniel turned away before she could see him. His breath hitched as he walked quickly back down the road, heart pounding harder than it had under enemy fire. The air was suddenly too thick, the world too quiet. He didn't know how long he walked before he stopped behind the chapel. The old cemetery sat in peaceful silence. He collapsed onto the bench he and Anna used to visit after Sunday services. The place they carved their initials into the underside. He touched the mark with trembling fingers. "Guess I missed my shot," he muttered to no one. The war had taken a lot from him, but this hurt more than any battlefield. Daniel didn't sleep. That night, he sat in the guest room above the town's only diner, a room Mrs. Daly offered with quiet understanding and no questions. He stared at the ceiling fan, listening to it spin, his thoughts louder than the blades slicing through. The air. What hurt more than seeing Anna with someone else was that she hadn't told him. Not in a letter, not in a word, just silence like he never existed. He rose before dawn and walked to the post office. The clerk on duty, an old man named Walter who'd known Daniel since he was a kid, blinked in surprise when he saw him. "Danny?" he said, standing up a little straighter. "You're home." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, just got in yesterday." Walter cleared his throat. "I'm sorry no one told you." Daniel leaned on the counter. "Did she ever send anything after October? A letter? A package?" Walter hesitated. "We got one back in November. Return to sender. Came from this address. Your base overseas." Daniel's chest tightened. "She never got it?" "No." "Figured, well, she got married right around then. Maybe she didn't want it." "Did she leave a forwarding address?" Walter nodded slowly. "She and her husband live in the old Miller place, about 4 blocks from here. They bought it after the wedding." Daniel swallowed hard. "Do you know who he is?" "Paul Keller," Walter said after a pause. "From the next town over. They met after you stopped writing." Daniel blinked. "She stopped writing." Walter frowned. "No, son. She wrote. Came in every week like clockwork, asking if anything had come from I saw the worry grow in her eyes every time I said no. Daniel's hands gripped the counter. But I wrote back. Every week. I told her I loved her, that I was coming home. I told her I... He cut himself off, the air thick with disbelief. Why didn't she get them? Walter scratched his head. There were some mix-ups, new protocols. We got dozens of undelivered military letters last winter. Delays, misroutes. Maybe yours got caught in that. Daniel's voice lowered. She thought I stopped writing. Walter nodded, sympathy etched in his weathered face. And maybe she thought you weren't coming back. The realization struck like a punch. Anna hadn't betrayed him. She'd mourned him. He left the post office in a haze. The sidewalks blurred as he walked, every memory now painted with new shades of sorrow. She had waited, believed in him, until belief turned to silence. And he had no one to blame. Not Anna, not... Paul had just war. That night he sat alone at the edge of the lake, where he and Anna once carved wishes into birch bark. He lit a small fire and pulled out the last letter she'd sent, the one he'd nearly memorized. In it she'd written, "I keep playing our song on the old radio. I don't even like it that much, but it makes me feel like you're still here. Come home soon. Love always, Anna." He hadn't answered, not because he didn't want to, but because he never got the chance. Now she was a wife, a mother, and he was just a man who came home too late. Daniel stood outside the Miller house the next morning, hands trembling at his sides. The house was modest, white siding, green shutters, a small front porch, the kind of place they used to. Talk about building together. He hadn't planned to come here, had told himself a dozen times on the walk over that it wasn't his place. But he needed closure. He needed to see her. He stepped up and knocked. A moment later, the door creaked open. Anna. Older, yes, but still her. Her eyes were the same soft brown, though they widened when they landed on him, her breath catching audibly. For a long, stunned second, neither of them moved. "Daniel," she whispered, voice trembling. He nodded slowly. "Hi, Anna." Tears welled up in her eyes before she blinked them back and glanced quickly over her shoulder. I didn't know. Come in, please." He hesitated, then stepped inside. The living room was warm and filled with the quiet clutter of family life. Children's books on the coffee table, a toy truck on the rug, framed photos on the mantel. He saw her wedding picture there. Her in a simple white dress, smiling beside a man he assumed was Paul. Anna sat on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. "I thought you were..." "I know," he said softly. "I didn't stop writing, Anna, not once, but I never got anything back after October. I thought you moved on." She looked up, shaking her head. "I wrote every week. I even went to your parents' house once, hoping they'd heard something. Then the letters stopped. No one would tell me anything." "There were delays," he said, "errors. Walter at the post office told me just yesterday. Everything was jammed up. We were both writing, but nothing got through." Her lips parted, as if trying to form words, but failing. "I came home and went straight to your house," he said. "Then I saw..." Anna's gaze dropped to the floor. "I waited, Daniel, I swear I did, until it felt like waiting was killing me. I know." The silence stretched, then came a small voice from the hallway. "Mom?" Daniel turned. A little boy, no more than 5, peeked into the room, rubbing his eyes. Anna quickly stood and went to him. "It's okay, sweetie. Go back to bed." He looked at Daniel curiously, then nodded and padded off. Anna returned to the couch, avoiding Daniel's eyes. "That's James. He's everything." Daniel smiled faintly. "He looks like you." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I didn't think you'd come back. I promised I would." Another silence. "I dreamed of this day for years," she said finally, voice thick. "But now I have a life, Daniel, a family. I'm not here to take anything from you." Then Why did you come? He looked around the room, at the photos, the toys, the memories that didn't belong to him. I think, he said slowly, because some part of me needed to know I wasn't forgotten, that what we had mattered. Tears slipped down her cheeks. It did, she whispered. It mattered more than anything. They sat in the quiet of what might have been. I'm glad you're safe, she said. I'm glad you're happy. I wish the world had been kinder to us, he nodded. Me too. He stood, heart heavy but full of something like peace. At the door, he turned back to her. Goodbye, Anna. She walked to him, touched his hand. Goodbye, Daniel. And this time, there was no silence between them. The road out of town felt different now. Daniel drove slowly, past the diner where they'd had their first date, past the school with the rusted flagpole where he'd kissed her behind the bleachers. It was all still there, and yet everything had changed. Time had done what war hadn't. Broken something between them. Not from lack of love, but from absence, from miscommunication, from life simply continuing. He didn't blame her. She had mourned him, believed him gone, and built a life in the ruins. That took strength, that took courage. Still, the ache settled deep in his chest. He stopped the car outside the cemetery. His boots crunched over the gravel path until he reached the familiar stone. Eliza Grant, 1934-1967, beloved mother. He knelt, brushing away a few dry leaves. Hey, Ma, he said softly. He hadn't visited her since before deployment. Too painful, too raw. But now he felt the pull to be near someone who had known him before everything got so complicated. I saw her, he said. Anna, she's married now, got a little boy. The wind stirred the trees gently. I thought I'd come back and we'd just pick up where we left off, like a story paused on a page. But the story kept going, Ma, for both of us. He sat there for a long time, until the sun dipped low behind the trees and the birds began to quiet. As he stood to leave, he whispered, I don't know where I go next, but I'm gonna try to find out. Back at the small rented room above Mr. Donnelly's garage, Daniel sat at the desk with a stack of old papers, some creased with age, others still fresh with ink. He pulled out a shoebox filled with letters, the ones he'd written Anna. The ones returned unopened, letters sent into silence. He opened one. I miss you most at night, when the air is still and the stars are so bright it hurts. I talk to you sometimes, pretend you're beside me. Maybe that's crazy, but it gets me through. Another. They say we'll be home by winter. I'm counting the days. I picture you in that red scarf you hate and know I'll never see anything more beautiful again. He wiped at his eyes, then he pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. This one he addressed to no one. Dear future, I'm not sure what you hold for me, but I've lost enough time. I've lived for memories and ghosts. It's time to live for what's left. Sincerely, Daniel. He folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and set it in the box. Not to forget, but to remember and move forward. Spring arrived slowly in Elmswood, with blooming dogwoods and the sweet hum of renewal in the air. Daniel found work with a local mechanic, a quiet place with more grease than conversation, which suited him just fine. Each morning, he walked past the bookstore where he and Anna used to browse old poetry collections. He never stopped. But once, he saw her through the window, her son laughing in her lap as she read aloud from a picture book. She didn't see him. He didn't wave, but he smiled. One afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, Mr. Donnelly approached. You thinking of sticking around longer? The old man asked. Daniel looked around. Maybe. Well, Donnelly said, tossing him a set of extra keys. This place could use a steady tenant. Rent's cheap, no questions asked. Daniel caught the keys. Thanks. That night, he sat on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the stars blink into life. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a ghost walking through. Someone else's story. He was writing his own, different than the one he'd imagined, maybe quieter, maybe slower, but no less meaningful. Because even after everything, the silence, the loss, the letters never sent, he'd found a way to begin. Again.